While the international community and news media focus on North Korean missile tests in the country's nuclear program, one expert warned on Sunday that North Korea may be secretly assembling the capability to take out significant parts of the U.S. homeland via an electromagnetic pulse or EMP attack. Dr. Peter Vincent Pry is Executive Director of the Task Force on National and Homeland Security and is the Chief of Staff of the Congressional EMP Commission. Speaking on a talk radio program, Pry pointed to two North Korean satellites that are currently orbiting the U.S. at trajectories he says are optimized for a surprise EMP attack. Aaron Klein Investigative Radio is broadcast on terrestrial radio on New York's AM 970 The Answer and News Talk 990 AM in Philadelphia and online. Now, Pry was referring to the KMS 3-2 and the KMS-4 Earth observation satellites launched by North Korea in April 2012 and February 2016, respectively. Let's take a listen to that broadcast interview right now.
Right now, I want to go to the guest line, and I want to turn to North Korea. Totally unhinged, and we have to pay very careful attention to the threats coming from North Korea because they're being minimized in a massive way by the news media. On Friday now, North Korea now accuses the United States and also, of course, South Korea of unsuccessful assassination attempt on Kim Jong-un. This time he claims involving biological weapons. North Korea's Ministry of State Security said that it will, quote, ferret out and mercilessly destroy the terrorists, quote unquote, in the CIA and in the South Korean intelligence agencies. And this after multiple threats by North Korea against the Trump administration and also against the United States home front. And I want to go immediately to the U.S. home front and the threats from North Korea because the media is not fully outlining what they are. So I want to do that right now with Peter Vincent Pry, who is the executive director, and this is very important, chief of staff, in fact, of the Congressional EMP Commission. He's also the executive director of the Congressional Task Force on National and Homeland Security. Peter Vincent Pry, Dr. Pry, welcome back to Aaron Klein Investigative Radio.
Thank you so much for having me, Aaron. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. So I want to get immediately to this Newsmax piece that you wrote because it's excellent, and you outlined how the media, you even cited a very recent example, is minimizing in a massive way, and this is very dangerous, the not just the missile threat, not just the nuclear threat, but I want to turn to the EMP threat, which they seem to be missing altogether. In fact, you write, quote, speculation is accepted as gospel that North Korea allegedly does not have a re-entry vehicle capable of penetrating the atmosphere. They allegedly lack guidance systems accurate enough to strike a military target or at intercontinental ranges, even a city. So putting aside the missile threat, which we addressed many times here on this radio show, and the media, again, is minimizing, you don't even need a re-entry for an EMP attack, correct?
That's right, because the warhead would be detonated above the atmosphere, exo-atmospherically, so you don't have to penetrate the atmosphere and re-enter to strike a city.
So then, therefore, when the media here talks, and we talk also about the missile threat, of course, and of the nuclear threat, something that Iran, we can learn a lot from when it comes to the nuclear deal with Iran. Let's look, how specific is the EMP threat from North Korea? Do you believe there's evidence that they have been preparing for just that? While we're sitting there focusing on the nuclear threat, which we should, on the missile threat, it's all interconnected. Has North Korea over the years been preparing, been testing for a possible EMP attack?
Well, the EMP Commission certainly believes so. And we've got the lead in the U.S. government. Our charter from Congress, basically is to advise Congress, the President, the Department of Defense. We have our powers are such that we can get any classified and unclassified information we need, and we can task analysis upon these departments and agencies. So we have extraordinary powers to get at the truth about what's really happening. And yet nobody in the mainstream media seems to want to talk to us. said they would prefer to talk to people who have no expertise at all on this subject, people like Jeffrey Lewis in 38 North, for example, as I mentioned in the article. And there's compelling evidence that the North Koreans know about the nuclear EMP attack. It's part of the nuclear threat. You'd use a nuclear weapon, to detonate above the atmosphere. Although there are also non-nuclear EMP weapons, which North Korea has also actually used against South Korea. It's one of the most astonishing things, too, that critics seem to be unaware of. That North Korea actually has conducted non-nuclear EMP attacks against South Korea in 2010, 2011, and 2012. They have a radio frequency cannon, so-called, puts out basically non-nuclear EMPs, like microwave radiation. And they used it in those 3 years to impose an electromagnetic blockade on Seoul. They were threatening airliners, with it, because the electronics and airliners and their global positioning systems are put at risk by this thing. And for some days, they managed to block all air traffic from going into Seoul. And some of the other consequences during these 3 years when North Korea made these non-nuclear EMP attacks against South Korea is it caused automobiles so they couldn't start. Radio stations were blacked out all along in Seoul and in towns and cities along near the demilitarized zone within range of this. So we know for a fact that the North Koreans know about EMP-type weapons and had actually used them for three years in the past. The commission was demarched in a highly unusual effort by two Russian generals who claimed they were there on their own. But Russian generals never do a demarche without the permission of Moscow. And in 2004, they met with the EMP Commission, asked to meet with us, and warned us that the design information for the Russia's super EMP nuclear warhead had allegedly been accidentally transferred to North Korea, and that, moreover, due to brain drain from Russian scientists, that there were Russian and Chinese scientists in North Korea helping North Korea work on developing a super EMP weapon.
Yeah, I mean, you point out, and this was April 30th, where South Korean officials told the Korean Times there, this was after the media told us also that there was a test on April 29th. There was a medium-range missile that the media told us was a failure, but South Korea actually is pointing out that it was detonated deliberately at 72 kilometers altitude, which actually happens to be pretty much the optimum burst height, you write, for an EMP attack. So we're speaking with Dr. Peter Pry, who's the Chief of Staff of the Congressional EMP Commission, and I'm very glad that you're now in this critical position. How would you advise right now Donald Trump to address this obviously unaddressed, largely, issue when it comes to North Korea and EMP?
Well, the first thing I'd recommend to the president is to shoot down the two North Korean satellites that are currently orbiting over our country on trajectories that are optimized for making a surprise EMP attack. We've got two North Korean satellites that are in permanent orbit. One was launched in 2012. The other was launched in last year. I believe it was February 7th. So they're called the KMS-3 and the KMS-4. And they're on south polar trajectories. This is another possible gift from our Russian friend. During the Cold War, the Russians had a secret weapon they called the fractional orbital bombardment system. And the idea was to do a surprise EMP attack against the United States by disguising a warhead as a satellite. And because a satellite trajectory is different from an ICBM trajectory that's aimed to go at a city. For accuracy on an ICBM, you launch it on a lower energy 45-degree angle, and it follows a classic ballistic trajectory like a rifle bullet, to land your missile on a city. But to put a satellite in orbit, you follow a different trajectory. It doesn't have accuracy, but it puts the satellite up there so that it can stay in permanent orbit. So it looks different in terms of the trajectory. And guys watching their radar screens tend not to get alarmed when they see a missile being launched on that satellite trajectory because they assume, well, that's for peaceful purposes. If all you think about is the classic nuclear attack against a city or a military base by blasting it, you're looking for that other ballistic trajectory, not a satellite trajectory. So the idea was, put a nuclear weapon in a satellite, launch it on a satellite trajectory to the south, so it's also flying away from the United States, and then orbit it over the South Pole and come up on the other side of the Earth so that it approaches us from the south. Because we didn't during the Cold War, and even today, we still don't have ballistic missile early warning radars looking south. We don't have any national missile defenses to the south. We're basically blind to defenseless to the south and can't see anything coming from that direction. Then when this gets over the United States, you light it off so it does an EMP attack. In the Russian case, what they were mainly interested in was paralyzing our strategic forces and our strategic command and control and communications so that we couldn't talk to our forces, and hopefully many of the forces themselves, the bombers, the ICBMs, the submarine support would be paralyzed, and that would give them time to then launch their massed attack across the North Pole to blow up our ICBMs. So they kill them once with EMP and then kill them again by blasting the bases, by using their long-range missiles like the SS-18. That was the Russian plan, but the cutting edge of their plan, was this surprise EMP attack. And the North Korean satellites are doing exactly the same thing. Now the North Korea doesn't have enough missiles or sophisticated enough missiles to blow up our missile bases and bomber bases. Well, actually, we've dismantled so many of our bomber bases, it wouldn't be hard for them to develop that number. We used to have 50 strategic air command bomber bases. We've reduced those to 3. So even a little country like North Korea could actually eventually get the ability to take out our bomber wing. But what they seem to be doing with the satellites is the EMP part of it. And they don't seem to be as interested in, well, possibly it is also, you could use the EMP to attack our strategic forces too if they've got a super EMP warhead, which is what the Russians told us they were working on. It has field strengths that are so high that it could damage and destroy even our protected EMP systems. But I think what they're mainly going for is the unhardened electric grid, transportation, communications, and all the other civilian critical infrastructure that we depend upon to keep our population alive. And I think that they're positioning themselves as sort of a nuclear missile age, cyber age version of battleship diplomacy, in my view. So that they can constantly they're going to try to build a constellation of these satellites so that they can always have one of them very close to being over the United States or over the United States. And then if a crisis comes up and we decide we're going to attack North Korea, Kim Jong-un can threaten our president and say, don't do that, because we're going to burn your whole country down, which is basically what he said. I mean, he's made threats to turn the United States into ashes, and he's connected his satellite program to this actual in public statements to deter us from attacking. And the other possibility is, or in addition to that, if we don't listen to those threats, then by destroying our country, taking out our civilian critical infrastructures, our military can't operate independently of our civilian base, our civilian electric grid. All of the economy and transportation systems, all of these things are necessary to project and sustain our military force overseas. So if you wanted to win a new Korean War, that's one of the things you would certainly consider doing is taking out the United States homeland itself.
Wow. Dr. Peter Vincent Fry, Executive Director, Chief of Staff of the Congressional EMP Commission. Thank you so much for being here on Aaron Klein Investigative Radio.
Well, thank you so much for having me and becoming part of the solution by helping educate the public about the EMP threat the mainstream media never talks about.
Thank you. Up next, phone calls on screen. I see Jimmy.
So the real question is North Korea preparing for a EMP attack on the United States, or could this be just some government official getting us ready for some sort of false flag event that they are going to blame on North Korea? That is a real question, and that is a real concern. Now, I did not make this video to scare anyone. I made this video so you can be prepared and have this information so you and your family can be ready for whatever happens. We don't know what the future is going to bring, but it's ultimately up to you guys to take care of your family. So hopefully this video informed you on what's going on. We have two possibilities before us. Like I said earlier, this could be a false flag event getting ready to take place. Some phony false flag event happens here in the United States. They blame it on North Korea, or it could be a real event that North Korea is preparing for themselves. Leave your comments below this video. Thanks for watching. Referring to the KMS 3-2 and the KMS-4 Earth observation satellites launched by North Korea in April 2012 and February 2016 respectively. Let's take a listen to that broadcast interview right now.
Right now, I want to go to the guest line, and I want to turn to North Korea. Totally unhinged, and we have to pay very careful attention to the threats coming from North Korea because they're being minimized in a massive way by the news media. On Friday now, North Korea now accuses the United States and also, of course, South
Executive Director of the Task Force on National and Homeland Security and is the Chief of Staff of the Congressional EMP Commission. Speaking on a talk radio program, Pry pointed to two North Korean satellites that are currently orbiting the U.S. at trajectories he says are optimized for a surprise EMP attack. Aaron Klein Investigative Radio is broadcast on terrestrial radio on New York's AM 970 The Answer and News Talk 990 AM in Philadelphia and online. Now, Pry was
South Korea of unsuccessful assassination attempt on Kim Jong-un. This time he claims involving biological weapons. North Korea's Ministry of State Security said that it will, quote, ferret out and mercilessly destroy the terrorists, quote unquote, in the CIA and in the South Korean intelligence agencies. And this after multiple threats by North Korea against the Trump administration and also against the United States home front. And I want to go immediately to the U.S. home front and the threats from North Korea.
While the international community and news media focus on North Korean missile tests in the country's nuclear program, one expert warned on Sunday that North Korea may be secretly assembling the capability to take out significant parts of the U.S. homeland via an electromagnetic pulse or EMP attack. Dr. Peter Vincent Pry is
because the media is not fully outlining what they are. So I want to do that right now with Peter Vincent Pry, who is the executive director, and this is very important, chief of staff, in fact, of the Congressional EMP Commission. He's also the executive director of the Congressional Task Force on National and Homeland Security. Peter Vincent Pry, Dr. Pry, welcome back to Aaron Klein Investigative Radio.
Thank you so much for having me, Aaron. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. So I want to get immediately to this Newsmax piece that you wrote because it's excellent, and you outlined how the media,